Hey there folks, so welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're finally going to be talking about the newest project from Billy Woods called Known Unknowns. Well, it's about damn time I got to this one. An artist I referenced in my last hip-hop review and who some have told me have dropped one of the best projects that have come out this year, and I have to say, it's taken me a while to really get to and get into Billy Woods. So here's some context. He's an underground New York MC. He founded his own label, Backwoods Studios. He's been putting out albums since the early to mid-2000s, but really started to hit a potent creative stride in the early 2010s, both on his own and as a member of the duo Armand Hammer with frequent collaborator Elucid, who I will probably end up covering his solo joints at some point this year, given his critical acclaim. And that's important to note here. If we're looking at New York underground hip-hop artists who are pushing and challenging the sound in the vein of what Def Jux did 15 years ago, I would definitely put Billy Woods in that list in a similar way I would Uncommon NASA. Kind of ironic there, because Uncommon NASA was around for that time. The bar's a little bit less direct here, but no less thought-provoking, and oftentimes over even more challenging production on records like History Will Absolve Me, probably my favorite of his. And yet, if I'm being brutally honest with you all, I have struggled to completely embrace a Billy Woods project as a whole. Some of his songs can tilt to around some paranoid alternative rap cliches, but a larger issue I found on his 2015 project, Today I Wrote Nothing, was a certain scattershot nature of a lot of songs. Potent in little snippets, but nearly always leading to projects that felt too long, too fragmented, and not quite coalescing as a whole, at least for me. Which was kind of frustrating, because between his blunt and curt style of delivery and some challenging and really experimental production, this is the sort of rapper I would love to wholeheartedly get behind. And with the continued stream of critical acclaim for his newest album, Known Unknowns, I was hoping that this would be the one to really do it for me. So, okay, what did I find with this? Well, here's the thing. I like this album a fair bit. It's got a couple of great guest verses. Blockhead's production, while not quite being as challenging or experimental as what Billy Woods has used in the past, is still pretty damn solid. It's probably Billy Woods' most accessible record to date, with some of his most defined hooks and verses, while still feeling thought-provoking and thematically cohesive, at least for the most part. And yet, once again, I find myself wishing that I could love this more. Make no mistake, it is potent and interesting, and I completely see the appeal of a record like Known Unknowns. I just wish that I had a stronger emotional connection to its arc and its direction. And considering how this has felt like an issue for multiple Billy Woods albums thus far, I really want to get to the bottom of why this is for me, especially as I don't quite have this issue with other acts in his orbit and immediate scene. And you know what? I don't quite think this is an issue that lies with the production. I'll be the first to admit that for as abstract as an MC as Billy Woods can be, giving him a slice of grimy, more direct, sample-heavy, but otherwise melodically accessible New York production from the underground can feel a tad out of place, but again, there is a focus on hooks and structure here more than his other projects, and it does help pull things together into more defined songs. And while I don't quite find Billy Woods an incredibly expressive or diverse MC when it comes to some of his flows, he's got a set of multisyllabic rhyming that fits across a number of different tempos, but outside of some of the hooks can definitely start to blur together from song to song. But yeah, this sort of production can flatter him. I like the horns against the faster percussion from Aesop Rock on Bush League, which will come back again against Barry McLean's excellent hook on with the deeper thrumming groove on Strawman. And hell, there is some really solid grooves across this album. Aesop Rock and Homeboy Sandman just ride the bounds of wonderful remarkably well. Really do like that song. The sparse rattling percussion anchoring Unstuck leads to another really solid hook. The noisy blast of harmonica leads to the unstable roughness of Super Predator that unfortunately that harmonica doesn't pay the same dividend on Kelloid that goes even more lo-fi. And I really dug some of the darker rumbles of bass textures that leaks through songs like Everybody Knows and Source Awards. Although, 2 songs earlier, it plays off the synth really well. I probably like that even more. I will say that there are some vocal samples and synthesizers that don't quite click for me, most notably on the closing track, Robespierre, and I do wish that I like Elucid's contributions to Nomento and Tupac Jackets. They clicked a little bit more for me, but again, I could say much of the same for a lot of Billy Woods' rapping as well. And okay, here's where things will get kind of complicated as we dig into the lyrics and themes. Because from the interviews that I read and the songs that I were able to decode from this album, and it was not all of them, I will stress this, I kind of think I understand what Billy Woods is looking to explore on Known Unknowns, most of which was focused on the idea of confronting the titular idea in a world where things are both constantly evolving, but the constant intimate situation for any one person never really seems to change. And while there is of course a strong fatalistic streak that runs through songs like Colloid, Billy Woods seems to be more interested in exploring why things don't change, or the root causes behind the things that he's unsure of to explain his own decisions or the lack of decisions. Police Came to My Show is probably one of the most straightforward examples for this project. A few people that he's almost positive are officers show up to one of his concerts, his expected crowd then clears out, and he's left with very little of any profit out of the whole affair. And it's making the point that simply through those police presence, it drove away an audience who might or might not have done anything illegal, but are now perpetuating the cycle of poverty, especially for artists, that could lead to more of this, especially if it becomes reflected again in his art, which it does on this song. Hell, Super Predator is a more lengthy exploration of violent imagery and iconography in hip-hop, where the art is reflective and then potentially perpetuating a grim, paranoid, violent reality. And yet, even he is conscious of the fact that he only realizes and speaks against it when confronting with his own morality on songs like Unstuck. The cats start to really gamble on their lives when they're on their 9th, after all. And you can tell that for Billy Woods, when he sees how those systems of white supremacy are then perpetuated in his own mind through the opening verse of Bush League, with the teams then trading uniforms, it's all the harder to break free of those thoughts, especially when he's forced to project a reinforced image of toughness in order to survive. It becomes a pileup of mirrors and projections, where people only see what they want to see or what is shown to them to reinforce expectations surrounding what these known unknowns are in their mind to give them some vestige of certainty. But the truth is that Billy Woods knows that he still has a soul and agency to challenge those known unknowns. And even if he continues to get no answers surrounding them, isn't it preferable to living in a world of veneers where he constantly is forced to challenge his own self-perception of reality? He'd rather be a rational actor in the scene who's not pretending, even if it sets him against a Sisyphean system that would seek to act out the same known unknowns against him in order to render judgment. Now here's the thing. If all that sounds confusing, I was able to untangle this through a lot of listens and checking through whatever interviews and whatever I could trace through the knotted web of references and a lack of a clean narrative. And even with all that, I'll admit across the midsection of this album, I started losing the plot entirely. And even despite solid production and potent delivery, when the hooks were replaced by disconnected samples and a lot of scratching, even though I liked that sound, I could easily see a lot of listeners just throwing up their hands and giving up. And on songs like Tupac Jackets and Source Awards and Gazpacho, I very nearly did. Knowing the words and references used did give me a rough idea of the intended mood of the writing, but unless I could trace to a central unifying statement on a hook like what Uncommon NASA does, or some sense of broader narrative like on a Quelle Chris's last project, or even the sense of the puzzle box has some simpler but emotionally compelling idea at its core, like some of Aesop Rock's more recent, thornier songs. It was impressive wordplay here, sure, but you lose some of the emotional through line. And what's exasperating is that when placed opposite songs where the meaning is abstracted but can be traced and can be figured out, these songs that are a little bit more knotted and thorny, they come across as diversions from the main theme, or assertions of closely held paranoia that's even more tightly knit that can be felt a little bit repetitive 4 or 5 songs in, especially when on other songs they are more cleanly expressed. Granted, Billy Woods has stated this record is a little less self-contained and was trying for more established song structures in comparison with Today I Wrote Nothing, and this does definitely connect more than that album did on the latter basis. But when the central idea is as well sketched and intriguing as it is on the songs I could figure out, the outliers, they fall even more in that indecipherable lane. Although I will give points for Billy Woods wrenching the themes back to the forefront in the final 2 songs for a pretty solid ending. I will give him points there. But as a whole, Again, I wish I had a stronger emotional connection to this project than I do, which is kind of what's holding it back from greatness in my eyes. Billy Woods, he's a solid as hell rapper. The production from Blockhead is varied and hard-hitting. There's a lot of cool wordplay and potent hooks and a really meaty idea and set of themes at the core, but again, maybe it's a little bit too scattershot, knotted in on itself, and again, longer than it probably needed to be as a whole. For me, I'm going to give it an extremely strong 7 out of 10 and a recommendation. I know a lot of hip-hop heads are going to love this, especially if you're in that fan base who loves seeing a Sonic equivalent to Def Joke's Second Coming. I just wish that I could connect with it a little bit more, get really more into it. Still though, it's worth the many, many listens, and that I do know for certain. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. Yes, I know it took me a long time to get to it. I'm happy I did. Oh, also, friendly warning, next couple of reviews, they're going to be a little bit strange because I will be on the road during vacation. So which other means not my regular studio, might be a little bit more handheld. You might see some friendly faces. You never know. We'll see what happens. But until then, if you guys want to buy the album, highly recommend you do. Links in the description below. And I got the poll up there for all you guys who have actually heard this album and able to figure out more of it. Actually, leave comments, see if you guys did figure out more of it, because this one, it was really hard for me to wrap my head around as a whole. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my schedule so I could cover this less than 2 months after it came out, link to my Patreon right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week you guys get to add records or even movies to that schedule. More details right there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.